And hello, team. Welcome back in the final lecture portion for week one. I'm going back to the last slide it just finished on just to make sure that we get it. That remember, business documents come in two forms. There's the business case that describes why your project is needed to the hierarchy of your company. Part two of the business documents are what we call the benefits measurement plan. This is about part two, the benefits measurement plan. And when you're thinking of benefits measurement, think, how does my project provide value? There's that word again, to the company. And in terms of value, in this benefits measurement plan, think in terms of either cost benefit analysis, think in terms of business value or benefits, and those are always smaller is better, right? If the company gives me $1 million to develop my product, right, they want their money back in a shorter period than longer. If they say, Andy, here's $1 million to develop your product, I need the payback period to be 6 months after launch, right? That's going to drive some of the decisions I make, a shorter payback period. Maybe it's opportunity cost, right? So in terms of opportunity cost, think in terms of my project, which was selected to meet business value, or this other project, which wasn't selected. Because they chose my project, there is a cost to the company for not pursuing this other effort. And that other project is that opportunity cost. That opportunity is gone. It doesn't exist because they're pursuing mine. So we want to be aware of that as project managers. Also, there are financial benefits or financial value in this benefits measurement approach. And instead of smaller is better, like the business value, in a financial terms, bigger is always better. And so we can talk in terms of the time value of money. Money has a present value today. But if I do nothing with my money, except put it under my mattress, it'll never grow in interest. And yet inflation will decrease the value of that money. So my present value today will be far less likely than a future value of money. So how can my project create a bigger value because they've invested, the company, their resources in my project? And this is what we mean about the time value of money. Also, two other quick concepts: internal rate of return. Just think of it as an interest rate, right? If my project is projected to return 18% interest based on the money loan to do this project, I mean, it's kind of like a loan, right? It costs the company money. And another project has 12% return, internal rate of return. Which project should the company pick? They'll pick mine because it has an 18% rate of return. Being aware of that as a project manager, I need to make sure that I can hit those expectations. And of course, often in business, we talk about this concept of return on investment, right? Return on investment. That's an exciting concept to think about because it's about understanding not just the dollars, largely financial, but also strategic value, knowledge-based growth, right? You can have so many categories of return on investment. Basically, how do you get the company to agree that your deliverable is interpreted as a good investment? Or is it considered a negative or bad investment? And some will do that. Some stakeholders will consider it a bad investment. You need to be aware of those. So be aware of understanding of return on investment. That was just kind of a summary from where we left off on the last lecture. Just wrapping it up, just a couple slides left. I do want to touch on the developmental cycle because we've already talked about, what does a project do? Well, largely we're taking something that could be considered chaos, or anarchy was used as well, right? Just as a way of thinking about it, and we're driving it through the complex to the complicated and hopefully back to simple. We probably never do get to simple, as we discussed in earlier slides. And this is happening through learning, right? Learning and knowledge sharing. Now, with that background, where do we even start a project? Well, I could start in a couple different ways, but one of the things you must do as a project manager, one of the very first things you're going to do after you collect your business documents, because now the project is now a company effort, right? It's a company strategic effort to fill a gap, a strategic gap, right? Here is what your project is doing. The company has a current state, we'll call it CS. There's some future state, right? And the company, through its the business documents that we've talked about, they want to get from this current state to this future state because they sense a gap in order to be competitive. And so this is where your project falls. And so one of the very first things you do is ask for the business documents, right? The business documents, as we've just talked on the previous slides. One of the very other things you're going to do right up front is determine, you must pick what is your developmental cycle. And I abbreviate it PA. Hey, Pa, right? It's a short phrase for dad, right? Hey, Pa. But it stands for, and you won't find it anywhere else but here, predictive project management, adaptive, or a hybrid, right? Hybrid's easy. That's really just a mix of predictive and adaptive. Adaptive is often has nicknames that's similar, called agile. It's also change driven. And a predictive project is known as waterfall. It's also known as traditional project management. It's also known as plan-driven project management. There are reasons for that. We're going to talk about them during the course. But realize, one of the first things you need to do is grab from the senior leaders the business documents, if they exist. I hope they do. If not, you have to fill in the gaps. You have to figure out where's the company vision at, mission, objectives, and fill in how your project will fit those, because you will make decisions based on that to ensure alignment, right? To ensure this alignment up and down the company. Now, one of the very next things you're going to do is choose what's your developmental cycle, or PA. A lot of companies will say, I worked for a company, an internet service provider, that said, we are a predictive waterfall project company. Do not even say agile. Don't even use those terms. Don't even purse your lips, right? So I didn't. But I did use a hybrid, which means I used some adaptive tools. I just didn't use those words because the company forbid it. I do not know why. They weren't project management experts. So understand that you'll walk a fine line and that all these tools can be useful to you. We were a predictive / waterfall only company, but I needed some adaptive tools that they just didn't understand. So I just didn't use those terms. Okay, but you'll have to pick with it because it's going to change the way you collect requirements, address risk, communicate to stakeholders, test your deliverable, share it with the customer, etc. It changes everything. So pick your developmental cycle once you have your business documents to ensure you're building your plan out. This slide is only meant as a one-stop shop summary of just about everything we've talked about so far. So what I do is, and I mentioned this in the pre-course lecture that I offered, the short lecture, start just here, right? And know that at the project, right at the very beginning, the project is going to want to align corporate strategy, right? And so to do that, you want to choose the developmental cycle. Take the business documents and pick your developmental cycle. Further, then, project managers will build a charter, assess stakeholder needs, and frankly define success. This is a picture of everything I've been talking about. In fact, there's that funnel. Remember, you'll want to grab the business documents and you'll want to make sure you align those documents, both the business case and the benefits management plan, into this detailed plan, which is going to help you produce your project deliverables. Bam! That's one vertical. Over here on the far right, I've got another vertical, right? So these are kind of overallisms or project manager isms, right? Overall, you'll spend your whole life making trade-offs as a project manager. If your budget is changed, it's going to impact your schedule or your scope that you can build, right? Makes sense. So be aware of the term trade-offs because that should focus your work. Notice that all projects are progressively elaborated, no matter whether they fit in PAW, whether they're predictive or adaptive or a hybrid. All projects, because the very definition of a project is that they are temporary and unique. And because they're temporary, short time period, and unique, they may be similar to something we've done recently, but they're unique. You will have to progressively elaborate them. And all projects, whether it's hybrid or not, are going to involve change because they are unique, right? So keep that in mind. And these are kind of some rules and philosophies for project managers. You could pause the video or print this slide out and read that for yourself. They're fairly self-explanatory. And then what I have here in the very center this is really the PMBOK guide, the current PMBOK guide, PMBOK 7. It says, look, as a project manager, you want to have, I'll change my pen to a red now. You want to have these core competencies as a project manager. These things are always on your mind. As you are building your plan, right? You want to work these domains that we already talked about as a summary to produce your deliverables along the way. And we touched on external factors, internal factors, remember EEFs and OPAs along the way. So this slide is just a summary. I love it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have too. We're off to a roaring start in week 1. Our exercise is going to focus on the Big Dig. And the Big Dig is a historic project in Boston, which added significantly some infrastructure that was badly needed. But here is a project that by normal standards is a massive failure. It was budgeted at about $2.5 billion. It ended up costing over $14 billion in the end. Fortunately, it was taxpayer money, or it probably would have been shut down. It was supposed to last a few years, and in the end took over a decade, right? It had some risks that weren't assessed, which led to some failures. But today, you can't imagine Boston without it, right? So what really is success? We'll talk about that during the course as well, because the project is a success because it was meeting state, federal, local citizen needs. And that's part of the assignment for week 1, to address that, to talk about it. So let's go have some fun. Let's do that. I look forward to seeing all of you online, and I will, and likely in person during the term.